The champagne was cold when it struck the top of my head. Adrian Cross poured it slowly. He did not lose his grip on the glass. He did not stumble, and no one bumped his arm. He stood beneath the gold lights of Atlas Aviation's executive ballroom and tilted his wrist until every drop ran through my hair, over my face, and down the front of my navy blue dress. 300 executives, investors, engineers, and invited guests watched. Phones rose above the tables. Someone laughed. Then someone applauded. Adrian lifted the empty glass toward the room. Maybe this will wash some of the fear out of our safety department. The laughter spread. My son stood beside me. Eli was 9 years old. He had spent 2 weeks building an aircraft model for the employee family exhibition and 6 hours choosing a tie because he wanted to look professional at his mother's company. Now he stared at the champagne dripping from my chin. Mom. He rushed forward and wiped my face with his sleeve. I caught his wrist gently. It's all right. It's not. His voice broke. Behind him, the Falcon X model lay on the floor. One wing had snapped away from the fuselage. The words Daniel had written inside it were exposed beneath the broken plastic. Build what deserves to fly. Adrian pointed at the model. Perhaps the safety department should begin with aircraft small enough to understand. More laughter followed, thinner this time. I looked past the phones and the smiling executives. Maya Cross, Adrian's older sister and Atlas's chief test pilot, was pushing through the crowd toward us. I looked back at Adrian. Are you sure this is how you want your first night as CEO remembered? He stepped close enough that only the first tables should have heard him. The phones caught it anyway. I'm sure this is how I want everyone to remember where you stand. 6 hours earlier, Eli had been sitting on our kitchen floor with a tube of silver paint between his teeth. Don't move, he said. I'm not moving. You breathed. I'll try to stop. He gave me the patient look children reserve for adults who are making a simple task unnecessarily difficult. The Falcon X model rested across my knees. Eli had built most of the fuselage from a company-approved kit, but he had redesigned the interior supports himself. The left wing refused to sit level, and he had decided the problem was not his construction but my breathing. I held still while he tightened the final screw. There. He leaned back to inspect it. At 9, Eli already had Daniel's concentration. His eyebrows drew together when he worked, and he pressed his tongue against one corner of his mouth before making a difficult decision. The similarity could still stop me without warning. Daniel had been gone for 5 years. An accident on a wet highway had turned me into a widow and Eli into a child who remembered his father mostly through photographs, stories, and the objects Daniel had touched before dying. One of those objects was the handwritten note inside the model's wing. Build what deserves to fly. Daniel had written those words on a piece of drafting paper while helping me prepare for my first major Atlas test program. I had kept the paper in my desk for years. When Eli decided to enter the family innovation display, he asked if we could copy the sentence into the aircraft. It should have Dad's words, he had said, because you both helped build it. I had worked at Atlas Aviation for 12 years, beginning as a test engineer who spent more time inside environmental chambers than conference rooms. I had learned to read failure in scorched insulation, corrupted signals, and tiny variations in heat. Eventually, I became chief safety engineer. Most of my colleagues knew very little else about me. They knew I was 40. They knew I had raised Eli alone since Daniel's death. They knew I rarely attended company dinners and never appeared in promotional interviews unless someone from communications trapped me beside an aircraft. They did not know why hotel managers checked my invitations personally. They did not know why some board members called my private number instead of going through the executive office. I preferred it that way. Eli stood and carried the model to the dining table. You should wear the silver dress. The one Atlas sent? It looks expensive. It is expensive. So why are you wearing the old blue one? I looked down at the dress hanging across the back of a chair. Because your father chose it. Eli considered that answer and nodded. Then wear the blue one. My phone vibrated. The message on the screen was labeled Board Council. Final governance documents are prepared. Chairman Hale requests confirmation that you still intend to attend without company security or staff support. Before I could answer, another message arrived. Eleanor Hale, Atlas's non-executive chair, did not waste words. Are you certain you don't want someone with you tonight? I typed my response. Tonight, I'm only Eli's mother. The 3 dots appeared immediately. That has never been your only role. I know. I turned the phone face down before Eli could ask questions. By 6 o'clock, the top floor of the Halcyon Hotel had become a monument to Adrian Cross. His face appeared on the ballroom screens above the words "A New Altitude." A line of illuminated Falcon X models ran through the entrance hall. The company had placed a full-size simulator beside the dance floor so investors could sit in the cockpit and imagine themselves commanding the future. The hotel manager met us before we reached registration. Ms. Ellis, welcome. I have personally confirmed your invitation and table assignment. The employee checking names looked confused. I'm on the engineering list, I said. Yes, of course. The manager lowered his voice. Table 6, as requested. If you need a private room or secure transportation, please let me know. We're fine. Eli held the model carefully against his chest. Is he always that nervous? He whispered after the manager left. Only around people who might review his hotel contracts. Are you reviewing his hotel? Tonight I'm reviewing your airplane. He accepted that answer because children often recognize when adults are closing a door. We had been inside the ballroom for 11 minutes when Adrian's assistant found me. The CEO needs you in the executive suite. The ceremony begins in an hour. He said now. I left Eli with 2 engineers from my team and followed the assistant upstairs. Adrian stood beside a table covered in Falcon X promotional materials. He was 44, newly appointed, and still wearing the confidence of someone who believed a title had settled every argument that came before it. Calvin Ross, the company's operations president, stood near the window with a champagne flute already in his hand. A digital safety confirmation waited on the table. My name appeared beneath an empty signature field. What is this? I asked. The preliminary release, Adrian said. Sign it. I saw the third-round data this afternoon. Then you know the aircraft passed. I know it passed most conditions. Calvin sighed. Adrian placed both hands on the table. We are announcing final certification tonight. You are announcing entry into the final certification stage. We revised the language. Without safety approval. We simplified it for investors. I opened the test report on the tablet. During high-humidity simulations, one of the Falcon X navigation sensors had produced intermittent position errors. The failure rate was low, and the readings corrected themselves within seconds. That did not make them harmless. During a transition from automated flight to manual control, a false navigation input could tell the aircraft and the pilot 2 different stories at the worst possible moment. We need at least 2 more high-humidity test cycles, I said. The sensor fault must be reproduced, isolated, and corrected. The anomaly appeared in less than 1% of runs. Aircraft do not become safe by rounding failures down to 0. We have backup sensors. And the current integration logic briefly prioritizes the corrupted input before it rejects it. Calvin set down his glass. For how long? 3 to 5 seconds. He relaxed. That's nothing. At approach speed, 5 seconds is not nothing. Adrian tapped the unsigned confirmation. This document does not authorize passenger service. It allows us to state that safety verification is substantially complete. It is not substantially complete while we have an unexplained navigation fault. His expression changed. I become CEO tonight, Nora. The sensor does not know that. I have investors downstairs who funded Falcon X based on this timeline. Then tell them the truth. We found an intermittent fault and are adding tests. You want my first announcement as CEO to be a delay. I want it to be accurate. He walked around the table. For 12 years, Atlas has rewarded your caution. I understand why. You are thorough. You are serious. You are also incapable of seeing a risk without imagining yourself putting your own child aboard the aircraft. I held his gaze. Would you prefer a safety engineer who never imagines a child aboard? You bring a mother's anxiety into every executive decision. Evidence does not become anxiety because a mother presents it. Calvin looked toward the door. Adrian did not. He had spent 2 years interpreting the board's trust in me as an insult to him. When a test flight produced an unexpected result, Directors asked for my analysis before they accepted the executive summary. Engineers brought disputed data to my department. My written objections remained attached to program records even when management disliked them. I had never campaigned for Adrian's position. That did not matter. To a man measuring respect as territory, anyone trusted beyond his control looked like a rival. I pushed the tablet back across the table. I will not sign this. I am also invoking the Safety Department's authority to prevent any passenger demonstration flight until the fault is resolved. Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't have authority over marketing. I have authority over the aircraft. We'll discuss your interpretation of that authority on Monday. It's in the safety charter. You should read it before then. I left him with the unsigned document. The formal part of the celebration proceeded as if our meeting had never happened. Adrian entered the ballroom through a tunnel of light. The audience stood. A video praised his leadership, his vision, and his promise to make Atlas faster, bolder, and less afraid of the future. Eli applauded because everyone else did. Is he the one who wanted your signature? He asked. Yes. Were you supposed to give it to him? Only if the data supported it. Did it? No. He stopped applauding. After the speeches, the orchestra gave way to louder music. Champagne moved through the ballroom. Investors tried the simulator. Executives who had spent months calculating their place under the new CEO laughed more loudly each time Adrian approached. The employee family exhibition occupied one side of the room. Eli placed his Falcon X model beneath a small card bearing his name. Engineers stopped to admire the internal wing design. Maya Cross crouched beside him while he explained why he had reinforced the supports. She was one of the few people at Atlas whose confidence came from doing something difficult rather than being watched doing it. I'd fly it, she told him. It's not finished. Best aircraft never are. Maya rose when she saw me. He told me you blocked the passenger demonstration. I blocked it. Good. You haven't seen the data. I saw Adrian's face. That told me he was asking for something he shouldn't have. The music stopped before I could answer. Calvin stood on stage with a microphone. During Atlas's early startup years, employees had ended celebrations with a game called Altitude Truth or Dare. It had once involved harmless questions, embarrassing songs, and champagne poured over anyone who refused. It should have disappeared when the company became responsible for aircraft carrying human beings. Adrian had decided to revive it. Our new CEO believes Atlas has become too cautious, Calvin announced. So tonight, someone must help us recover our courage. Staff rolled a silver cart onto the dance floor. A single champagne glass rested on it. Calvin scanned the room. Adrian said something from his table. Calvin laughed, but his eyes moved toward me. No, Maya said under her breath. Adrian took the microphone. Calvin appears to have lost his nerve. More laughter. Perhaps he has been spending too much time with our safety department. He walked toward the silver cart. Conversations faded as people realized this was not spontaneous. He picked up the glass and looked directly at me. Tonight was supposed to celebrate Atlas moving forward, he said. Unfortunately, some people build careers by making sure everyone else remains afraid. Eli moved closer to me. Maya stepped into Adrian's path. She gave you a safety report, not a declaration of war. This is a company tradition. It's humiliation. It's champagne. It's retaliation. Adrian smiled at his sister. Move. No. The room watched them. He lowered the microphone, but not enough to hide his words. The chief test pilot serves at the CEO's discretion. Your Falcon X authorization can be replaced. You would ground me for objecting to this? Your flight team budget has not been approved. Think carefully about whether Nora's anxiety is worth your cockpit. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped beside me. If respecting evidence costs me the cockpit, then the cockpit was never safe. I would remember that. Maya did not know why Eleanor Hale called me directly. She did not know what was contained in the final governance documents waiting with board counsel. As far as Maya knew, I was an employee Adrian could dismiss on Monday. She stood beside me anyway. The audience could have stopped him then. 300 people could have refused to laugh. Calvin could have put down the microphone. The investors could have left. The engineers who had relied on my signature could have stepped forward. No one did. Adrian crossed the remaining distance and poured the champagne over my head. Calvin backed into the family exhibition table while trying to move away from the cameras. Eli's aircraft fell. The wing snapped. When the first people laughed, others followed. Not because the act was funny, but because the new CEO had established the price of silence and the reward for joining him. Eli tried to wipe my face. Maya shut off the music herself. "Put your phones down," she ordered. A few people obeyed. Most continued filming. "Nora did her job," Maya said. She reported a safety concern supported by test data. If Atlas teaches engineers that identifying a risk leads to public punishment, the next person may remain silent. Adrian set down the empty glass. "Your position will be reviewed Monday." "So will yours," Maya said. He laughed. He believed she was speaking emotionally. I knew she had said more truth than she realized. I picked up the broken model. The sentence inside the wing remained intact. "Build what deserves to fly." "Come on," I told Eli. "Are you quitting?" "No." That answer surprised Adrian more than anything else I had said. I left the ballroom with champagne in my hair, my son's hand in mine, and 300 people mistaking restraint for defeat. In the parking garage, I placed the broken model carefully on the back seat. Eli stood beside the car. "Why didn't you tell them?" "Tell them what?" His eyes moved toward my phone. Eli knew enough to understand there were parts of Atlas I did not discuss at work. He did not know the full structure, but he knew Eleanor Hale was not simply a colleague. "That you can make him stop." I looked back toward the illuminated hotel. "I can ask people to stop him." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." My phone rang. Eleanor did not bother with a greeting. "I have the video. I'm calling an emergency board meeting." "Wait." Silence. "How long?" she asked. 30 days. "Nora, he poured champagne over you in front of your son." "I know." "He threatened the chief test pilot for defending a safety report." "I know that too." "Then explain why Adrian Cross should remain CEO for another hour." "Because tonight can be dismissed as alcohol, ego, and one incident. If we remove him immediately, he will say I used my family position to punish a man who embarrassed me." "And you care what he says?" "I care what the board can prove." I watched Eli through the windshield. He was trying to fit the broken wing back into place. Adrian has spent his career believing oversight is the only thing preventing him from leading the way he wants. Now he believes no one can stop him. I need to see what he does with that belief. "You are proposing an experiment with a company. A controlled governance review. Not an experiment with safety." I listed the conditions. The Falcon X passenger demonstration would remain blocked. Independent safety monitors would receive live access to testing data. Board counsel would preserve all executive communications. Any retaliation, altered report, budget threat, or attempt to override safety controls would be documented. "The moment an aircraft, a crew, or a passenger is at risk," Eleanor said, "the test ends." Agreed. "And if he targets Eli? He won't get a second chance." Eleanor exhaled slowly. 30 days. Not 31. The next morning, I arrived at Atlas at 7:20. My hair was clean. I wore a gray suit. The broken Falcon X model rested in a box on my desk, waiting for Eli and me to repair it together. The champagne video had reached every floor of the company. Conversations stopped as I crossed the engineering wing. Several people looked ashamed. Others avoided my eyes because they had laughed. A few watched me with the curiosity reserved for someone expected to resign. I entered the safety laboratory and requested the next humidity test schedule. Above us, Adrian stood inside his glass office with Calvin. He saw me open my computer. He saw that no emergency board meeting had removed him overnight. And, because he could imagine silence only as weakness, he smiled. Now everyone knows she has nowhere else to go. By noon on the morning after the gala, the champagne had become company policy. No document announced it. No executive memorandum instructed employees to laugh at safety concerns or avoid the woman who raised them. The lesson spread more efficiently than that. 237 Atlas employees received the video before lunch. It moved through private messages, department chats, and family groups. One recording had been slowed down so viewers could watch the champagne strike my hair. Another added music and froze on Eli's face as he tried to wipe mine. A regional manager shared that version with the caption, "Champagne Imam survives another emergency." He was not disciplined. Instead, Adrian invited him to an executive lunch 3 days later. The people who had once stopped by my laboratory to ask about test tolerances now found other corridors. Engineers who had trusted me with unfinished concerns began sending formal emails instead of speaking privately. One analyst entered the elevator with me, pressed the button for another floor, then stepped out before the doors closed. No one wanted to appear close to the woman the new CEO had marked as disobedient. On the 4th day, Adrian announced an organizational realignment. 2 engineering supervisors who had objected to the gala incident were transferred to facilities outside Seattle. One was sent to a maintenance unit in Arizona. The other was moved from flight systems to supplier documentation, a position that required none of the expertise she had spent 14 years building. Dr. Henry Vale, the technical director who had supported 2 additional humidity test cycles, was offered early retirement. When he declined, his access to the Falcon X program was removed. Calvin Ross received complete operational control of Falcon X. Maya's authority over test profiles was reduced. I was removed from the CEO's strategy council and all weekly executive meetings. The final change was buried on page 9. The safety department would no longer report independently to the board's risk committee. It would report through operations. Through Calvin. The man who had called 3 to 5 seconds of corrupted flight data nothing was now expected to summarize our objections before they reached the board. I documented every change. Date. Time. Authorizing executive. Stated business reason. Employees affected. Connection to prior safety objections. I did not use private systems or collect documents outside my authority. I preserved what appeared in official records, what was sent to my department, and what employees voluntarily reported through the protected safety channel. Each evening, board counsel received an encrypted copy. Adrian mistook my silence for permission. By the end of the first week, employees understood the new rule. Mocking me was safe. Standing near me was not. Maya waited until after dark on the 8th day to visit the safety laboratory. She entered through the test hangar wearing a flight jacket over ordinary clothes. The security log would show that she had accessed an aircraft facility, not my office. "You're being followed," I said. "Monitored." Adrian isn't subtle enough to follow anyone. She placed a tablet on my desk. The newest simulation results showed the original navigation fault under a more dangerous combination of conditions. High humidity saturated the external sensor housing. A rapid temperature drop produced condensation inside one connector. For 4 seconds, Falcon X reported the wrong altitude. The difference was small at cruise level. During approach, it could put the aircraft lower than both the automation and the pilot believed. Calvin approved a passenger demonstration for 10 days from now, Maya said. Who will be aboard? Investors, media, 2 state officials, and Adrian. He thinks his presence makes it safer. He thinks his presence makes it important. I opened the source data. The anomaly had occurred twice in 24 runs. The second event had also delayed the warning displayed to the pilot. Has operations seen this? They received it at 4:14. And the demonstration remains scheduled? Maya nodded. The 30-day review had never included allowing an aircraft to leave the ground with an unresolved safety risk. I opened the company's flight authorization system and invoked the Independent Safety Reserve Clause. It had been created before Adrian joined Atlas, after an earlier executive team pressured a test crew to continue during unstable crosswinds. The clause required 3 things: documented technical evidence, a defined safety concern, and certification by the chief safety engineer. I supplied all 3. At 9:12 p.m., every passenger flight involving Falcon X was suspended. At 9:13, the full simulation dataset transferred automatically to the external certification repository. At 9:14, the cockpit recorder, test telemetry, and black box simulation files entered protected storage. The safety lock could be released only by agreement among the chief safety engineer, the external certification representative, and the board risk committee. The CEO could not override it alone. Deleting or altering any underlying record would generate an automatic board alert. Adrian called me at 9:17. "What did you do?" "I stopped the demonstration." "You had no authority to cancel a CEO event." "I suspended a passenger flight." "What you plan to call it afterward is irrelevant. You're exploiting an obsolete clause. It remains in the charter. I am the chief executive of Atlas. You are one of 3 people who cannot release that aircraft." His breathing changed. "You're using motherhood to justify fear." "I'm using data to keep your confidence from becoming a casualty report." He hung up. The following morning, legal received instructions to investigate whether I had abused safety authority. Adrian demanded access to the protected files, but the external certification system rejected his credentials. The demonstration disappeared from the public calendar. The aircraft remained on the ground. That was the first limit Adrian discovered during his 30 days as an unchecked CEO. It made him more determined to remove the others. I learned about Project Skyline on the 12th day. The name appeared in a financial dependency report sent to safety because Falcon X relied on systems owned by an Atlas subsidiary called Aegis Navigation. Aegis had lost money for 6 consecutive years. On paper, selling it made sense. Its environmental chambers were expensive. Its engineers took years to produce marketable systems. Its patent expenses rose every quarter, and most of its current revenue came from internal Atlas licensing that accounting treated as a cost transfer rather than external profit. Adrian described the subsidiary as a research burden with no path to scale. He had negotiated a sale price of $350 million. The executive summary called that price generous. The technical annex told a different story. Aegis owned the automated flight dispatch system planned for every Falcon X delivery. It controlled the core navigation architecture being tested in our simulator. It held 63 active patents covering sensor reconciliation, route optimization, and autonomous recovery logic. 3 commercial airlines had submitted preliminary licensing proposals. None appeared in the valuation summary. I requested the full dependency model through the access attached to my safety role. If Aegis changed ownership, Atlas would need assurance that Falcon X could continue using its systems. The model showed that after the sale, Atlas would retain only a 2-year transitional license. After that, we would pay the buyer for technology our own engineers had developed. The projected licensing cost over 10 years exceeded the sale price. I asked corporate finance for the long-range valuation. They sent a model estimating Aegis's 5-year commercial value at a conservative $2.2 billion. That model had been excluded from the executive packet. The proposed buyer was Skyline Mobility Partners, a private investment vehicle formed 11 months earlier. Skyline was owned by a Luxembourg holding company, which was controlled by a Delaware technology fund. The fund's largest capital partner was Meridian Aeronautics, Atlas's largest competitor. Adrian was not selling a failed subsidiary. He was selling Atlas's navigation architecture, 63 patents, 3 potential airline clients, and a decade of technical control to the company most capable of using it against us. I sent the ownership trail to board counsel. Then I waited for the quarterly leadership meeting. It was the last formal review before the Skyline agreement could be signed. Adrian had removed me from strategic meetings, but the safety charter still gave me the right to attend any transaction review involving certified flight systems. He tried to keep my presentation off the agenda. 3 operating directors objected. On the 21st day, I entered the main conference room carrying a 12-page report. Adrian sat at the head of the table. Calvin occupied the chair beside him. Maya had been invited only because the committee needed confirmation from the chief test pilot before approving the next Falcon X schedule. I began with the ownership structure. 3 corporate layers appeared on the screen, ending with Meridian Aeronautics. This connection was disclosed in the transaction appendix, Calvin said. On page 418, I replied. It does not appear in the executive summary, the risk analysis, or the valuation. I displayed the 3 airline licensing proposals. Then the Aegis patents. Then the 5-year valuation. 2.2 billion, one director asked. Conservative, I said. It assumes only one of the 3 airline licenses is completed. Another director leaned forward. Why are we selling for 350 million? Because Aegis has operated at a loss, Adrian said. Its losses come primarily from research infrastructure and patent development, I replied. Those costs created the asset Skyline is buying. I displayed the Falcon X dependency model. If this sale closes under the proposed terms, Atlas will lose permanent control of the navigation architecture inside its own aircraft. After 2 years, we will pay the buyer licensing fees for technology developed by Atlas employees. Questions began moving around the table. Calvin stopped answering them. Maya reviewed the projected licensing obligations, then looked at Adrian. You knew Falcon X would depend on Meridian after the transition? It will depend on Skyline, Adrian corrected. Skyline is funded by Meridian. That does not make them the same company. It makes one of them an expensive mask. Adrian's face hardened. I moved to the final section. The navigation system also remains under active safety restriction. We have now reproduced the false altitude reading under combined humidity and temperature conditions. Until the cause is corrected, any claim that Falcon X has completed safety validation is inaccurate. One of the directors asked Maya whether she would conduct the next flight. No, she said. Not with the current sensor configuration. Adrian looked around the table and saw the same pattern he had resented for years. He had entered expecting approval. Now the directors were looking at me. He could not disprove the ownership records. He could not erase the airline proposals or explain why the higher valuation had been omitted. So he returned to the one argument that had worked at the gala. Some people still haven't learned the difference between being a worried mother and running an aerospace company. The room went silent. I closed the remote control in my hand. Which number on the screen is maternal? This company cannot be governed by your personal fears. Then challenge the data. I'm challenging your judgment. Because you cannot challenge the data. Adrian stood. Effective immediately, Nora Ellis is removed from Project Skyline. The safety department will have no further role in the Aegis transaction. Calvin will hold full operational signing authority. You cannot remove a certified safety dependency from a sale because you dislike its conclusion, I said. I just did. He turned to Maya. Your Falcon X test authorization is suspended pending a fitness and insubordination review. Maya removed her flight tablet from the table. The sensor will still be defective when you find a pilot who is more obedient. Adrian ignored her. I gather my documents. If this decision costs Atlas billions or puts one crew at risk, are you prepared to answer to the person who owns this company? He laughed. Then tell the owner to come see me. I looked at him. Fine. The champagne video reached public social media 2 days later. An employee's spouse uploaded it with a caption praising Adrian for putting corporate fearmongers in their place. By morning, it had been copied thousands of times. Eli's classmates recognized me. 3 boys cornered him near the cafeteria. One held an empty juice cup above his head while another repeated Adrian's words about washing away fear. A teacher stopped them before they poured anything. Eli did not tell me until that evening. I found him sitting at the kitchen table with the broken Falcon X model in front of him. Why do you still go there? He asked. Because my work matters. To them. To the people who will fly on what we build. He picked at the fractured edge of the wing. Why don't you tell everyone you aren't weak? Being quiet is not the same as being powerless. That sounds like something adults say when they want children to wait. The answer struck harder than the champagne had. He looked at me. Why do the people who did something wrong get to keep their jobs, but Maya loses her airplane and kids laugh at me? There will be consequences. When? Soon. Would Adrian do this if Dad were here? I went still. Eli's eyes filled. Is it because you don't have a husband to protect you? I moved to the chair beside him. No. Your father loved us, but I did not need him to make my work true or my voice important. Then why are you letting Adrian do this? Because I wanted evidence that could survive Adrian's excuses. Because removing him after one drunken act would allow half the board to call it a personal feud. Because Atlas employed thousands of people, built aircraft that carried families, and controlled technology worth more than any one executive. None of those reasons erased what my decision had cost my son. I chose to wait, I said. I believed waiting was necessary. But that choice hurt you, and I'm sorry. He did not forgive me immediately. I did not ask him to. Instead, I opened the repair kit. Together, we aligned the broken wing and reinforced it from inside. Eli wanted to sand the fracture until it disappeared. Then he changed his mind. We left a narrow line visible across the silver surface. It still flies in the model program, he said. It can be repaired without pretending it was never broken. He nodded. The test is almost over, I told him. How long? 7 days. Adrian spent those 7 days searching for a reason to fire me. Human Resources gave him my complete employment record. 12 years. No disciplinary findings. Every annual evaluation in the highest category. Multiple safety awards. Commendations from certification authorities and test crews. Several evaluations had been signed directly by Atlas directors. My original background review contained an exemption from the chair's office. My emergency contact was not a parent or sibling but Hale, Bennett and Rowe, the law firm administering a private family trust. Those details should have made Adrian cautious. Instead, they confirmed the story he preferred. I had spent 12 years cultivating powerful allies. My safety objections were political maneuvers. My access to directors proved disloyalty rather than responsibility. When he could not find misconduct, he manufactured a pattern. I was accused of bypassing the CEO by communicating with board counsel. My use of the safety lock became deliberate exaggeration. My Aegis analysis became interference with a lawful corporate transaction. Maya's refusal to fly became evidence that I had created division within management. Calvin and 3 employees who had laughed during the gala submitted nearly identical statements claiming I had threatened to use outside influence against Adrian. The phrase appeared in all 4 documents. On the 30th day, Adrian summoned Atlas's senior leadership to the same top-floor ballroom where he had poured champagne over me. The stage was gone, but the gold company emblem remained on the wall. Calvin placed an empty cardboard box on a table in front of me. Adrian stood where the champagne cart had been. This review has established a continuing pattern of conduct harmful to Atlas Aviation, he announced. You have misused safety authority, obstructed an authorized asset sale, bypassed executive reporting structures, and encouraged insubordination within the Falcon X program. Maya stood near the back of the room. The 2 reassigned engineering supervisors had joined through video conference. Human Resources occupied the first row. Security waited beside the doors. Adrian held out a termination document. Your employment is terminated for cause, effective immediately. You do not have risk committee approval to remove the independent safety lock, I said. This is not about the aircraft. This is about you. It has always been about the aircraft. You simply needed it to become about me. His expression tightened. This time, being a single mother won't protect you. I unclipped my employee badge. It never did. The evidence did. I placed the badge beside the cardboard box. I did not fill it. My personal belongings had been removed the previous evening. Every company record remained in Atlas custody. Every protected file had already been preserved through lawful systems. Adrian would not be able to accuse me of stealing data simply because I carried a box through the lobby. Security escorted me to the elevator. As the doors closed, Adrian looked almost disappointed. He had expected tears, an argument, or a final request for mercy. I gave him none. 9 minutes after I left the building, every senior executive's phone received the same emergency notice. Eleanor Hale has convened the full board. Mandatory attendance. 1 hour. Adrian read it as confirmation. The chair was finally coming to approve what he had done. He returned to the executive conference room with my personnel file, the 4 coordinated witness statements, and the disciplinary report he had prepared for her signature. At 5:13, Eleanor Hale entered. Every director stood. Adrian began explaining that the company had removed a disruptive employee who had used personal relationships to interfere with executive authority. Eleanor did not look at his investigation. She looked at the empty chair where I had sat for 12 years. Where is my granddaughter? Where is my granddaughter? For several seconds, No one in the conference room answered Eleanor Hale. Adrian stood at the far end of the table with my termination file open in front of him. Calvin sat beside the 4 statements they had used to accuse me of disloyalty. The cardboard box prepared for my belongings remained visible through the glass wall outside. Adrian recovered first. Nora Ellis has been suspended for conduct damaging to Atlas Aviation. Eleanor removed her coat and handed it to board counsel. Who approved that? I did. Adrian straightened. I'm the chief executive. And you believe that gave you authority to dismiss her without consulting the board risk committee? The decision concerned an employee, not a board matter. Eleanor looked toward the company's general counsel. Show him. The counsel opened a secured folder and placed 3 documents on the screen. The first was my mother's birth certificate. The second was the Hale Family Trust. The third was an executed voting control agreement dated 10 years earlier. Eleanor remained standing. Nora is the only child of my late daughter, Margaret Hale. Adrian looked at the name on the screen, then at the empty chair he had expected me to occupy. Nora's husband was Daniel Ellis, Eleanor continued. After they married, she took his surname. When she joined Atlas 12 years ago, she entered through the standard engineering recruitment process as Nora Ellis. At her request, her family relationship was not disclosed to management. Calvin leaned toward the screen. This doesn't mean she owns the company. No, Eleanor said. The trust documents do. The next page appeared. The Hale family controls 51% of Atlas Aviation's voting shares. Those shares were transferred into an irrevocable trust with Nora as the sole beneficiary. I currently exercise voting authority as trustee. Upon my retirement, Nora becomes the successor voting trustee and assumes full control. Adrian's face changed as he read. This was amended after the gala. The general counsel answered before Eleanor could. The trust was executed 10 years ago. The succession terms have not changed since. Atlas was valued at approximately $18 billion. For 30 days, Adrian had called its future controlling owner an anxious mother. He had poured champagne over her, removed her from meetings, stripped her department's independence, manufactured a disciplinary record, and finally escorted her from the building. Not because he knew who I was. Because he believed I was no one he needed to fear. Adrian sank slowly into his chair. This creates an undisclosed conflict of interest. Eleanor's expression did not move. Nora disclosed her beneficial interest to the board, the general counsel, the company's auditors, and every regulator required to know. She refused executive privilege, began as a junior test engineer, and accepted 12 years of ordinary performance review. She concealed it from me. She protected the company from men who perform respect only when ownership is in the room. A board member closed the termination report. Where is Ms. Ellis now? Security escorted her out 9 minutes ago, the head of Human Resources said. Eleanor looked at him. You allowed that? He lowered his eyes. Board counsel called me before I reached home. I returned to Atlas 43 minutes later. My employee badge remained on the table where I had left it. I did not put it back on. I carried a worn black folder containing authenticated copies of the documents gathered during the 30-day review. Daniel had used the folder years earlier for household records. The corners were soft, and one hinge had been repaired with dark tape. When I entered the conference room, every director stood except Adrian. He rose a moment later. Nora. His voice had changed. For 30 days, he had spoken my name like a disciplinary problem. Now it carried the caution he normally reserved for investors. He came around the table. I believe we need to correct a serious misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. The gala was an executive celebration. Everyone had been drinking, and the champagne was part of a game. You carried the glass across the room. I thought you understood the tradition. My son understood it. Adrian glanced toward Eleanor. The suspension was procedural. Nothing has been finalized. I can restore your title immediately, along with your reporting authority. You terminated me for cause. The classification can be withdrawn. He spoke more quickly as the room remained silent. I will issue a company-wide correction regarding the video. We can confirm publicly that your safety record remains exemplary. Atlas can also establish an education fund for Eli. I would personally contribute. You humiliated his mother, so now you want to buy his education? That is not what I meant. You never asked what he needed. I'm trying to make this right. I set the old folder on the table. If I were only an engineer and a single mother, would you be apologizing now? Adrian looked at the directors. No one offered him an answer. If the trust documents did not exist, I continued, would I still be outside with security? This situation is more complicated than that. It became complicated only when you learned my name was attached to 51% of the voting shares. Nora, nothing you did changed in the last 10 minutes. Only what you learned about me changed. Eleanor indicated the empty chair beside her. I did not take it. I remained standing at the end of the table where employees usually delivered reports to executives. The champagne is not why this board is here, I said. Adrian seized on the sentence. Then we agree that the gala has been exaggerated. No. We agree that humiliation revealed your judgment. The next 30 days revealed how you govern. I opened the folder. The first screen showed the organizational chart before and after Adrian's promotion. 2 engineering supervisors had been transferred after defending my safety recommendation. Dr. Henry Vale had been pushed into retirement after requesting additional testing. Maya lost operational authority after challenging Adrian. My department's independent reporting line had been redirected through Calvin. Beside each change was its date, authorizing email, and stated justification. Every person punished here raised an evidence-based objection, I said. Every person promoted supported Adrian after the gala. Calvin shifted in his chair. I was promoted because Falcon X required unified leadership. The next slide showed the gala video. A still image captured Calvin laughing while Eli's aircraft fell behind him. Beside it appeared the document granting Calvin full operational authority 4 days later. Unified loyalty, I said, is not the same as unified leadership. I moved to the safety evidence. Environmental simulation data filled the screen. The first anomaly showed the navigation error under high humidity. The second reproduced a false altitude reading when humidity combined with rapid cooling. The error lasted 4 seconds. A flight trajectory appeared beside it, illustrating how much altitude an approaching aircraft could lose before the pilot received correct information. Adrian leaned forward. The aircraft had redundant sensors, and the integration logic temporarily prioritized the corrupted input. My report explained that before the gala. I displayed his email requesting my preliminary approval before the ceremony. The wording was direct. Signed before 6 o'clock. Investors cannot hear about another delay. Next came the passenger demonstration schedule. 10 days after the new anomaly, Adrian, investors, journalists, and public officials had been booked to fly aboard Falcon X. Maya spoke from the opposite side of the table. I would not have accepted the flight. Adrian looked at her. You were no longer assigned. Because I refused to call the aircraft ready. I submitted the timestamp showing when I invoked the Independent Safety Reserve Clause. The External Certification Authority confirmed receipt of the full dataset 1 minute later. Simulator records, cockpit displays, and test telemetry had entered protected storage automatically. Then I displayed a message from Calvin to a systems administrator. Remove the humidity warning from the executive dashboard. Reclassify the second event as simulation noise. We do not need 2 red flags for the same non-issue. Calvin's face lost color. That was a request to clean up duplicate reporting. The events occurred under different environmental conditions. The source records were never deleted, because the safety lock preserved them before your instruction reached the administrator. The external certification representative joined by video. She confirmed that the error was real, repeatable, and significant enough to justify grounding passenger demonstrations. She also confirmed that no authorized safety reviewer had approved the disputed configuration. Adrian turned toward the directors. No one was hurt. Because the aircraft never left the ground, I said. I moved to Project Skyline. The first page listed Aegis Navigation's 63 patents. The second displayed the 3 airline licensing proposals omitted from the sales summary. The third showed the independent valuation placing Aegis's 5-year commercial value at no less than $2.2 billion. The proposed sale price remained on the other side of the screen. $350 million. Then the buyer's structure appeared. Skyline Mobility Partners led to a Luxembourg holding company, which led to a Delaware fund, which led to Meridian Aeronautics, Atlas's largest competitor. One director removed his glasses. Was this relationship disclosed to the transaction committee? In an appendix, Adrian said. Page 418, I replied. It was excluded from the executive summary, valuation analysis, and strategic risk presentation. I displayed the transitional license. After 2 years, Atlas would have been required to pay Skyline for continued access to the navigation architecture developed by its own subsidiary. The 10-year licensing projection exceeded the sale price, I said. Atlas would have sold its future for $350 million and then paid its competitor to use it. Adrian looked at the general counsel. This transaction went through internal review. It had not received final approval, she said. Ms. Ellis's report raised material concerns before signature. I opened the final section. Human Resources had reviewed my 12-year file and found no disciplinary history. The first internal investigation ended without a finding. Only after that failure did Adrian create a new misconduct case. For witnesses submitted statements claiming I had threatened to use outside influence. All 4 had attended the gala. 3 had circulated the video. Calvin submitted his statement after receiving Falcon X operational authority. I placed 2 lists side by side. On the left were the names of the people recorded laughing, sharing the video, or supporting Adrian's champagne punishment. On the right were the witnesses used to justify my dismissal. The lists matched. Not almost. Completely. The champagne did not cost you this office, I told Adrian. The next 30 days did. He looked toward Eleanor. You allowed this to continue. I authorized a limited governance review, she said. Under independent legal supervision and with an immediate safety stop. You set me up. No, I said. You were given authority. What you did with it was your choice. Maya stood when Eleanor asked her to give formal testimony. She confirmed the censor findings. She confirmed that Calvin had pushed for the passenger flight despite receiving the new simulation data. She confirmed that Adrian threatened her cockpit assignment, team budget, and test authority after she defended the safety report. Would the demonstration have proceeded without Nora's safety lock? A director asked. Operations intended to proceed, Maya said. I would have refused to fly, but Adrian had already discussed replacing me. Eleanor called the meeting to order. She proposed 6 emergency measures. Adrian would be suspended as chief executive pending independent investigation. The Aegis sale would freeze immediately. Falcon X would remain grounded for passenger operations and undergo external technical review. Calvin would lose all operational authority. The safety department would regain its independent reporting line. Every relevant employee would preserve emails, messages, personal work devices, and transaction records under legal hold. The vote was not unanimous. It was not close either. 10 directors voted in favor. 1 abstained because of a prior commercial relationship with Skyline. Adrian was the only person who said no, though he did not have a board vote. When the result was announced, security did not enter. The company's general counsel handed him a written suspension order and explained his obligations. He would retain counsel, cooperate with investigators, and remain paid until the board reached a final conclusion. Consequences did not need theater to be real. Adrian closed the document. Then he looked at me. Why didn't you tell me who you were? I thought of the champagne running into my eyes. I thought of Eli kneeling beside the broken model and my colleagues learning that kindness could damage their careers. I needed to know how you would treat someone you believed could not fight back, I said. You answered without being forced. For months later, the independent investigation ended. Adrian was formally removed as CEO. Calvin resigned after investigators confirmed that he had ordered safety warnings removed from the executive dashboard and provided misleading testimony during my disciplinary case. His conduct was referred to the appropriate civil and regulatory authorities. No one invented criminal charges merely to make the ending more satisfying. The Aegis transaction was permanently terminated. Independent valuation experts confirmed that the subsidiary's commercial value was at least $2.2 billion. Investigators also verified Meridian's financial control behind the proposed fire. Falcon X received redesigned sensor connectors, revised integration logic, and 2 complete additional rounds of humidity and rapid temperature testing. It passed. No passenger or test pilot had been injured because the safety lock had never been released. Maya became chair of a new independent flight safety committee after a vote from directors who reviewed her test record and her conduct during the 30-day crisis. The committee reported outside ordinary executive operations. Eleanor retired from voting control at the end of the investigation. The trust terms activated exactly as they had been written 10 years earlier. I became Atlas's controlling shareholder. I did not hold a celebration. I did not pour champagne over anyone, and I did not dismiss every person who had laughed that night. The investigation distinguished between actions. Employees who altered records, coordinated false testimony, or participated in retaliation faced formal consequences. Managers who had remained silent received mandatory governance and reporting training. Employees who preserved evidence or raised concerns received whistleblower protection. A new system allowed any worker to submit a documented safety objection directly to the independent committee without executive approval. For months after the gala, Eli carried his repaired Falcon X model into the same top-floor ballroom. The wing opened properly now, but a thin line remained where it had broken. He had refused to paint over it. "Did you stay because you wanted Adrian to fail?" he asked. "No." "Then why did you give him 30 days? "Because the board needed evidence that could not be dismissed as a personal argument." He ran his finger along the repaired wing. "But you knew he might do more bad things." "Yes. Wasn't that dangerous?" "It could have been. That's why I locked the aircraft before I waited. I never let that plane leave the ground." He considered this. Was staying brave? Not by itself. Enduring harm is not automatically courage. The important part was making certain his decisions could not hurt a crew or passenger, and preserving the truth so he could not deny what he did. The new leadership team entered the ballroom. I stood in the same place where Adrian had poured champagne over me and announced 3 rules. No position would ever rank above responsibility. No safety evidence would be dismissed as emotion. No employee presenting documented concerns would face retaliation for speaking. Eli placed the repaired aircraft on the table beside me. Power had not changed Adrian Cross. It had only convinced him that he no longer needed to hide. My silence had never been surrender. It was the space in which he revealed everything.